we are going to be making some bacon chicken ranch melts using some ranch seasoning. And then we're going to prep our delicious like sourdough yeast rolls for tonight's dinner. And then we're going to prep some Easter cookies. So let's get our bacon cooking up. So I'm going to get my skillet over here. Last night we used some of our bacon and our potatoes. So we're going to take out a couple strips here and we're going to fry them up and then we'll cook our chicken in it. But we want to just get it nice and ready. This is one thing, like it's nice when you cut, like I cut my pack of bacon in half and then you have like perfect little strips for sandwiches. So we're just going to cook up about 6 strips. So 3 for each sandwich. We'll save this bacon, and since my hands are still bacony right now, we are going to at least fillet our chicken breasts in half so that we can make 2 sandwiches out of a chicken breast because chicken breasts are fairly big. There we go. Okay. Now, let me go get my hands washed since they're all chickeny and bacony. Okay. Before we finish that, I have 3/4 cup of warm milk. So it's whole milk. And we are going to add in just a half a teaspoon of yeast. So this is going to be for our sourdough rolls. You don't need much yeast, just half a teaspoon, but it really helps out the sourdough in it. So we're going to put a half a teaspoon in our warm milk. You don't want hot milk. If it's too hot, it will kill the yeast. But you do want it to be nice and warm to make it active. And then we are going to add in some sugar. We don't need much sugar, just about a tablespoon of sugar. We'll add a little bit more later, but we're just going to use a tablespoon right now to help that yeast get nice and active. That was a half tablespoon. So let me do 2 of them. And then we're going to give it a little stir. And we're going to let that yeast start to bloom for our things. Let's get back to our chicken. Forgot to grab my Worcestershire sauce. I always use this when I'm cooking up chicken because it makes it so tender. So we're going to drizzle just a little bit over each side of our chicken breast here. And we're going to use a little bit of ranch seasoning. We're going to use this to season the chicken, and then we're going to make a little ranch dressing to go with it. So, and you want to use a good amount. So we're going to give a nice little sprinkle. I'm going to cover each. This is going to give it that nice flavor. Let me grab some tongs, and then we're going to flip it over. And we're going to do the exact same on this side. We're going to cover it with a little bit of Worcestershire sauce and a little bit of ranch. And then we're going to just let it sit and marinate for a second. And we'll cook it in our bacon grease when our bacon is done cooking up. So just a little bit. And just kind of shake it over. And then those yummy ranch flavors will sink into that chicken as it's cooking. Okay. I'm going to let that sit there. We've got our bacon cooking here. While our bacon is cooking up and our yeast is frothing, let's get our rolls started going for tonight. And then we'll cook up our, or make up our dough for our cookies. But with the rolls, I like to let the flour hydrate and do a couple kneads. So we're going to start it so we can get those in. We are going to start with our liquids in here, and then we're going to add our dries. So here is my sourdough starter. We're going to feed it afterwards so we can make some homemade bread for tomorrow. We're going to add in a 1/3 cup of sourdough starter. It does not need to be active. It's just a great way to use your discard, but you want a 1/3 cup because these are going to sit and rise until dinner time. So with the yeast and the discard, you're going to be able to get a good, like, you know, a rise out of them. And these make the best dinner rolls. So we have our 1/3 cup of starter here. Let me get a little spatula out so I can get all of this out of my cup. Here we go. I turn my temperature down on my bacon, and we're going to use some tongs to flip them. Here we go. That way we can have nice straight strip. Normally when I'm frying up bacon for my dinner or for breakfast or whatnot, we do kind of like the crazy fry where you just like toss them. But on sandwiches, you do want that nicer flat strip. Okay, so we have our starter in here. We are going to add in a 1/4 cup of melted butter, which is a 1/2 stick, and I am using salted butter. And add that and give this a nice little stir. And then we are going to add in 1 egg. I'm going to pop my yolk, and we're going to mix this up well. There we go. And make sure that egg gets all the way mixed up into it. Okay. There we go. Now we've got just our sourdough starter, our butter, and our egg mixed together well. We are going to add in our yeast. It's started to get a little bit foamy. It doesn't have to completely foam up. You just want to know that it's active and going, because it'll have plenty of time to rise in our bread. And we're going to give this a nice stir. Mix those together. And then we're going to add in the rest of our sugar. So we're going to add a little less than 1/4 cup of our sugar in for our yeast rolls. So they have just a very mild sweetness to them. There we go. We're going to give this a nice stir. And then we're going to add in 2 teaspoons of salt. So 1 and 2. Let's give our bacon a little flip here. There we go. We want them to crisp up nicely. I like to turn mine down nice and low so that it cooks low and slow, so you get a nice crispy, crunchy bacon versus ones that might burn up. There we go. See if we can get all of that closer together into that oil. Put these right over here. We don't need that. Okay. Now we have all of our wet ingredients mixed together here. We are going to add in 3 cups of all-purpose flour. You don't need to use bread flour on this recipe. All-purpose flour, it turns out just great with it. So no need to waste bread flour. Okay, we're going to put in 3 cups. And I think we're done with the spatula. We're going to use our dough whisk. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. Slide this out of the way. And then we're going to use our dough whisk, and we're going to mix it together until it forms kind of a shaggy dough, and then we're going to knead it for a few minutes. And we're going to do a couple of kneads because that kneading is going to give you that nice elasticity to your bread, which is going to make it much more tender and soft. Okay, so here we've kind of got a nice kind of stiff shag to our dough. So it's not going to be completely formed yet, but we're going to knead it together. And then we let it sit, and then it hydrates. The flour hydrates. It kind of takes in that milk and that liquid, and it will make it more supple. Get our bacon real quick. I can smell it crisping up here. There we go. I'm going to do some little gymnastics, move things around. Okay. These will be done in just a second. So we're going to toss our dough out here onto our countertop. And we're going to save our bowl because we're going to use our bowl for it to rise. And you're just going to give it a really good knead until everything is incorporated. It's going to have a slight stick to it, but it shouldn't completely stick to your hands. It should just feel wet and sticky versus actually like clinging to you. Trying to get all of those things. And then we're just kneading it until it works together. There we go. This is where you got to get your elbow grease in. Okay, so this is our first set of kneads. So you're just going to do it for about a minute or two, not a super long amount, but it's really to make sure everything is incorporated. And then we're going to let it sit in our bowl and hydrate for a few minutes before we do our next set of kneads. Let's grab our bacon out. So that we have it nice and ready for our sandwiches. Put them on our paper towel so it can absorb any of that extra grease. Makes it a little bit more crispy. Here we go. So we've got our bacon right there. And now we're going to place our chicken breast in here. I have turned it down, but we have the nice bacon fat to cook it in. And our chicken breast that we have cooked up in ranch, or seasoned up with ranch. Let's see. There we go. And I have it on about a 4, and we're going to let that sit and cook for just a few minutes. My hands are washed. And while these are cooking, we can start the prep on our cookie dough. Let me move my starter out of the way. We'll feed you up in just a second. So we're making some little Easter cookies using some, they're really just M&M cookies, but whenever you have those fun seasonal M&Ms out, you can just put them up, and then there's special Easter one. So it makes the kids a little bit, more excited. I mean, they love cookies anyways. So we're going to start with 2 sticks of softened butter. So room temperature butter. It just helps with the creaming of the butter better. Hard, like cold butter is just harder to cream, takes a lot longer. So we're going to start out with 2 room temperature sticks of butter, and I'm going to give it a quick little cream in my stand mixer. And so my trick with making most cookies, there's a few I don't do this, but I chill the dough so we'll bake them up at tonight's dinner, because the chilled dough leads to a much better, softer cookie. Okay, so we've got our butter starting to cream. Now we're going to add in our sugar. So this recipe calls for 3/4 cups of white sugar and 3/4 cups of brown sugar. So we're going to pack this down. This is a 1/2 cup. So we're going to pack it in with brown sugar. You always want to pack it in. So there's a 1/2, and then we just need a 1/2 of this as well. So there's 3/4 cups brown sugar. And we need 3/4 cup of granulated sugar or white sugar. And then you're going to cream your sugars and your butter together until they form a nice kind of creamy paste. While that is creaming, let's flip our chicken over here. Yeah, this one does not want to grab for me today. There we go. We have our 2 things. We're cooking them low and slow so that these will cook all the way through. If you want to cook them up faster, just hammer them out a little bit with a meat tenderizer, and you can cook them up in half the time. While our butter and sugar is creaming over there, let's start on our homemade ranch dressing for it. So we're going to put in about a 1/3 cup of mayo and about a 1/3 cup of 1/2 and 1/2. Now you can use whole milk for a thinner one, or if you have buttermilk's even better. But I like a really rich ranch dressing. So we're going to do about a 1/3 cup of this. And then we're just going to throw in the rest of our ranch packet. And boom, easy. simple, but it's so much better than store-bought. Now, if you have buttermilk, that is like makes the best ranch. But again, not everybody buys buttermilk. So I like to do it with some half and half. Makes it a bit richer and creamier than like just whole milk. Now we'll see if we need just a tad bit more. But you can see we've just got this lovely, thick, and delicious ranch. Delicious. We're going to let that sit and hydrate those herbs. Okay. And let's check. These are looking good. I don't want them to burn. Let's look over here. We've got our butter and our sugar creamed together well. It's formed a nice, delicious kind of paste, which is what you want. Okay. So we've got there. Now we're going to add in 2 eggs. So 1 and 2. And we're going to cream the eggs into our mixture until they've incorporated. There we go. And it's like with a mixer or stand mixer. Okay. So if you have a stand mixer and sometimes the butter and the cream get stuck on the side, just use a spatula and push it down. You want to make sure you get that all incorporated so that your final product has good, like equal amounts of ingredients. So let's give these, whip that up real quick. And perfect. Now we are going to add in the salt and baking soda and vanilla. So we're going to use 1 tablespoon of vanilla. This is going to give them just a lovely, lovely flavor. So 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. And then a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of baking soda. So 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 1 teaspoon of salt. And we're going to cream those together. Let's check out our chicken here. Looking good. Looking good. I'm going to turn off my skillet. While that is creaming, we're going to bring our bread over here. Okay, we'll let that sit for just a second. We're going to use up the rest of my sourdough bread. That's why we're going to feed our starter in just a little bit so we can make some new loaves tomorrow, because sourdough is delicious, but it does take like a hot minute to make it. You can't just say, I want sourdough and expect to have bread tonight. You know, it really needs a day or so for it to rise and get to where it needs to be. So let's scare. This one must have had a big bubble in it. I find that with my house starting to warm up now that the weather is getting nicer, I'm having to shorten my proofing time on the counter because it's warmer, so it proofs much faster. And if you overproof it, you're going to get bigger bubbles in it. And so I've been adjusting it and shortening it up so that, and that's just because in the last week, it's like increased by like 20, 30 degrees outside. And so my house is a lot warmer. But you know, when you're stuck in that like spring limbo where you can't like put the AC on because it still gets really cold at night, but then you get stuck with it being really hot in the afternoon. So that's kind of what we're stuck, because our nights are still in like the 50s, but the daytimes we're getting up to like high 70s.
But you have a question. Do you recommend chilling all cookie dough prior to baking, or just certain ones?
Just certain ones. So the ones that I feel like chocolate chip, white chocolate macadamia nut, I find oatmeal works great with it. There are certain ones. Now, if you want a cookie that spreads out and you want it to be crispy, you don't chill those. But if you like those chewier ones, you want to chill them because that's what makes them chewy, because it takes longer for the butter to melt. Okay, let's get our sandwiches starting to assemble. That way we can have them start to cook. And we're going to do a little bacon ranch here. So we're going to use some sharp cheddar. But I will say I never knew to chill. Growing up, we never chilled our cookie dough. But my sister's mother-in-law made the best chocolate chip. Every cookie she made was so delicious. And eventually she goes, my trick is chilling the dough. And if you chill the dough, you'll have a nice chewy cookie versus a crunchy cookie that stays chewy. And so ever since then, my cookies, I've always done it. You know, there's a few doughs that I don't do it with, but it does make a huge difference. Where's got my bacon chicken? We're going to put a little bit of red onion on here. This will give it a nice little, you know, Christmas, little bright crunchies to it. You don't need much red onion. I will say a little goes a long way. Where are my spatulas? Okay. We're going to put our chicken on. And luckily, these were the smaller sizes of our sourdough when you get towards the end. So this chicken fits perfectly on each one. And then, since I love tomatoes, I'm going to add some sliced tomatoes on mine. Just a little, and you want to try to cut them as thin as possible. And then we're going to give them a little drizzle of ranch so that you can have your nice little ranchy flavor. And then I'm going to give a lot on mine. So we've got our ranch and now our bacon. We'll put our strips of bacon. You don't want to stay up there. We'll just take you off towards the end. So we've got our bacon on here. And then we're going to add our last layer of cheese on each side. And my trick with the cheeses is you don't want to have them like drizzle over the side. So just break them so they are exact area of where the bread is. That way they don't burn down onto your skillet. And then let's put our second. And we're going to let it start toasting up to melt that cheese and everything for the sandwiches. And we'll have that going. And now let's finish off the cookie dough so we can give a nice knead or get that chilling and knead. So we added in our baking soda, our salt in there. So now what is left is our flour. Where are you? We need 2 1/4 cups of flour. So 1, 2, and 1/4. We're going to cream that up. And once that is mixed together, then we'll add in our M&Ms. Done with our sugars. We're going to add that over here. And just anytime you have any come up to the top, just push it down. That way you don't have any butter that gets stuck on your bowl. Now you can do this with a hand mixer, or even like you could do it yourself. But I find stand mixers work the best for it because you do need a bit more elbow grease for creaming butters and sugar. Okay. And once it forms together into a nice big ball, a big clump, that's when you know you're ready to mix in your M&Ms. So we've got it right here. I'm just going to slide it out, and we're going to mix I like to mix my M&Ms by hand. Now, you can always pour them in, but I do find that sometimes what happens if you pour them in, your mixer will like crush some of your M&Ms into the sides of the bowl. So if you want them to stay all pretty, just use a little elbow grease and mix them in yourself. And I'm going to put the whole bag in because you want about 2 cups, and the whole bag is around 2 cups. And you can never have too many M&Ms. Get all of this deliciousness off. If my children were here, they would be taste testing the dough. Okay, so again, just scoop around, make sure you don't have any clumps of flour or whatnot, but because I always start with my wet ingredients, I rarely have a chunk of flour that's not mixed in. Put our M&Ms in, our fun Easter ones, the pastels. And these are just regular milk chocolate M&Ms, but you can see they're just so pretty and fun that they'll make them feel extra special. And then we're going to just give them a nice stir until they're incorporated. And it will be a really pretty dough. And the nice thing about M&Ms is they keep their shape. So when you bake them up, they're just going to look beautiful with all those pastel colors because the candy shell keeps them from melting. Here we go. And so now we have our M&Ms mixed up well. And what I like to do is I'm going to chill the dough in the fridge until dinner time. All it really needs is about an hour to 2 hours. But what's also great is you don't necessarily have to bake them up all at the same time. You could bake up half of the dough and then bake it up the rest the next day or 2 days so that then you have fresh cookies every day until it's gone. Okay, let's flip our sandwiches here. I feel like the butter should be about melted and ready for flipping. You want to make sure you hold it together when you do the flip. We've got our butter melted right here. I'm going to flip these. We're going to start with it now, getting it nice and golden crispy. It always takes a minute or 2 for your skillet to warm up. But let me wipe our counter because we're going to do our next set of kneads. And then we need to feed our sourdough for tonight. But we've got a little bit of vanilla on here from our cookies. I don't want that in my dinner rolls. Okay. So now that the dough has hydrated a little bit, you can see it's much more pliable. The elasticity is coming to it. You're going to do a few more kneads, and then for the next hour, you're going to kind of do your stretch and folds, just like a typical sourdough bread where you stretch it out. But you want to make sure you knead it until you have a really good stretch on it so that you can have those really tender rolls. And then I'm going to show you what a stretch and fold is if you're not familiar with the like sourdough process. So with sourdough, you don't knead your bread because it's a stickier, higher hydration bread, meaning it won't keep its shape like this until the end. So what you do with a typical sourdough is you're stretching and folding it in, which is essentially what a knead is. But we're just going to make sure you stretch it. But I like to make sure I pull it apart, and I'm constantly like breaking the dough apart like this. That's going to help develop your gluten in your sourdough. This is a hybrid sourdough yeast mixture. Okay. We're going to let this sit, and it's going to just sit on our counters and rooming until we mix it. Okay, let's flip our grilled cheeses now. We're getting on to the home stretch now. We're going to be crisping it up on each side. Turn these down just a little bit. And while we're waiting for these to crisp up, let's feed our 2 starters. So I've been using up my sourdough. They haven't been fed in about a day and a half. So we need to feed them up because if you want to bake sourdough bread, your starter has to be active. And they need to be fed every 1 to 3 days. So we're going to add in 10 tablespoons to each one. And it doesn't matter if they're over packaged. You just want to have about equal parts water and flour. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay. Got one down successfully.
Why don't you explain where you're counting out loud and on your fingers?
I count out loud and on my fingers because when I am thinking about other things, I miscount all the time. And I either add in 9 or 11 scoops.
Even with the double counting.
Even with the double counting, it's terrible. I've miscounted probably on stream 10 times. So it's kind of a running joke. My husband counts along too with me, so it keeps me on track. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I almost messed up there, and I don't know how I messed up. My fingers were both going up. Okay. Before we add in our water, we're going to flip our sandwiches because they feel like they've got nice and golden. There we go. Got to hold you down together. Don't fall apart on me. There we go. So this is going to be for our last crisping up. Tuck that piece of bacon back in there. Okay. So we added 10 tablespoons of flour to each one. So we need to add 10 tablespoons of water, which is equal to 150 milliliters. So instead of having to count out, it's much easier to do it this way. So we've got 150 goes in there. And 150 goes in this one. And then we're going to I got to find my long, skinny spatula. Here it is. These are your best friends when it comes to your starters. You got to give it a nice mix up. You want to try to make sure all that gets in there. It's fine if you have a couple chunks or lumpy. Just make sure you scrape the sides of your jar so you don't have any pockets of flour that kind of gets stuck there, because you do want your starter to eat all of it to make it nice and bubbly. And when you feed it, what will happen between now and the time we use it at dinner tonight, it's going to grow in size because when the active bacteria eats the glucose from the flour, it releases a gas, and that's what causes it to rise. And that's the process that is used for your sourdough. So we're mixing up our starters right here. Now they're perfect. Looks like our bacon ranch melts are just about done. So we have our sourdough mixed up. What you want to do is once they're mixed up, we are going to cover them with our cheesecloth. I recommend if you're going to do it, get a little set. Once you have this set, it makes it so much easier. So we've got these covered with these so we can make our things. But instead, we're not going to have sourdough tonight because sourdough takes about 2. We're going to have our sourdough discard yeast roll. So we're going to have our dough proofing. And then we're going to bake up our Easter M&M cookies for tonight because, you know, the dough has to chill for that perfect chewy. You can bake them up right now, but you're not going to get that nice chewy cookie that you want because the butter will melt and spread out faster. Our grilled cheeses are done here, so let's plate them. And let's get a little bowl for the ranch, because I like to dip mine in the ranch. So we put some on here. So we have, oh, you can see our cheese is even starting to get gooey and melt away. So this is our bacon ranch melt using our homemade sourdough loaf. Then we sauteed up chicken that we marinated with some ranch seasoning and Worcestershire. Topped with some bacon, sharp cheddar cheese, and again, some homemade ranch to dip it in for just a delicious sandwich. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. We had a lot of fun prepping our cookie dough, making our yeast dough, and cooking up our lunch. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making for our family and whatnot. And again, all of our videos from our live streams we upload onto the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate one of our recipes, you could just cook along with it in the future. Well, guys, thanks again. I hope to see you guys tonight at our dinner stream.